I don't know why we call this session a fireside chat, because apparently there is no fireside. Do you have any idea why? No. Okay, you don't. You were wondering the same. Okay. So, le grandi ipocrisie sul clima. We have a present, we have a, yeah, can we...
Oh, yeah. Why don't you come to the front?
Ok, so, le grandi ipocrisie sul clima. I mean, it will be one of the big 7 points of the paper, of the final paper of Pontignano. We will discuss this very thing, how to basically redesign the Green Deal tomorrow with the Green European Foundation, with you, Taube. And we will also have Roger tomorrow in talking about the challenge of industrial policies, and more specifically on the, as far as the automotive industry is concerned. So this is the book number. How many books did you write?
For me, 6. This is the 6th, of which 4 with him.
Well, that's. I thought it was many more than that. And let me introduce Roger Abravanel. He's director emeritus at McKinsey. So we share something. We have an alma mater in common. And the same thing applies to Luca Dagnese, who is now head of policy evaluation and advisory at Cassa Depositi e Prestiti. You are both great manager with great passion for also for policies, you know, right? Okay. And they will discuss your book together with Bill Emmott, chairman of the International Institute for Strategic Studies and former editor-in-chief of The Economist, and Anna Marucci, who is the head of fixed income at Euronext Borsa Italiana. And I know that Euronext also has got a very radical, strong position on the corporate sustainability directives. You even proposed a completely renaming of the ESG. So you will probably talk a little bit about that. But now I will leave the floor to Luca and Roger for the presentation of the book. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Francesco, thanks for inviting us, inviting this beautiful place, to give me a chance to see an old friend whom I haven't seen for quite a while. And we are not activists, we're not climatologists, we're not environmentalists, and we're not academics. We are business people and corporate people. And so what we hope to give you with a perspective in our book, and a perspective about what's happening in the corporate world now on the topic of sustainability, how in a very few months since Donald Trump has arrived, this word is becoming a terrible word in the corporate world. We're witnessing, we know what is happening. We saw it happening. Our book was published in November, and we know what is happening. And now, so we hope to provide to you who are thinking about policy this perspective, because it has a big implication on policies. Corporate have a big implication on what would the policy be in the future for Europe in particular. So we're going to leverage a bit on what we learned also in the past 3 months in talking a book. We had almost 30 events around the world. I think we meet hundreds of people. So we have a perspective. And the first perspective is, believe it or not, that's what Luca is saying, we're not climatologists, but we understand the challenge. And we have learned that this challenge is still incredibly, incredibly underestimated.
So why it's underestimated? Because people recognize climate is changing, but they don't look at the entire spectrum of the consequence that this change can have. Just one example here, migrations. We will have, it's estimated, 1.2 billion of climate refugees in 25 years. And of course, many of them will come to cooler countries, will come to Europe, possibly to find better conditions for living. Another thing we underestimate, actually, is on the opposite side, is how much progress in the last 20 years the fight against climate change has been doing. The biggest success in the fight against climate change has been the revolution on the way electricity is produced around the world. Renewable energy investment have overtaken those in fossil fuels in 2023 globally, including all the investments in oil exploration and production. And in 2024, renewable plus networks have been twice as much the total investment in the entire fossil fuel value chain. A second element of disruption and of totally difficult to estimate, to evaluate in advance success was what's happening in the world of electric mobility. A few decades ago, electric car existed, but they were considered a total niche, probably good for golf carts or other type of applications. Now they are a successful product in lots of parts of the world, not only in the Nordics, in China, half of the cars that are sold are electric. How we got there? We got through a process in which politics and policy making actually have been interacting with two other components. One is civil society, and the other one is business, and especially innovative businesses. And this three-way interaction has been happening in a totally different way that used to happen a few decades ago, also for the contribution of social media and the way information has been circulating. It started all from society, actually, scientists first and activists later, who raised the alarm on climate, and then politics reacted most with direction setting, that actual specific policies. There was first the Kyoto Protocol, then the Paris Agreement at the global level. But what was the real driver change in our perspective has been the effect of what innovative business have done. In the field of electricity, utilities that have invested in renewable energy have been able to create more value than those who have been left behind. And the same thing has been happening in electric car for the automotive industry. These companies are making this investment not for the good of the planet, but because they viewed an opportunity to create value for their shareholders better than others. Against this background, we are seeing some pushback and some really, some problems that can really create issues for the development of the fight against climate change. One is what we call the neo-deniers. There are deniers of climate change, especially in the United States, that simply say that climate change does not exist, climate change is a Chinese hoax. So, this is something in Europe we don't see a lot. We see something else, though, what we call the neo-denialists that say, okay, climate change exists, it's a problem, we recognize that, but just don't do it something now. Renewables can't solve the problem because wind turbines are ugly, we don't like them. Let's bet on nuclear energy that will be safer and more cheaper tomorrow, because the one today is not cheap at all. We don't want Chinese electric cars because they are destroying our automotive industry. The overall transition is too expensive. Let's delay investment. And finally, with the change in US policy, there is no use in cutting our emissions, European emissions, if other countries don't do it as well. All of this, of course, brings the big risk, the economic risk of doing nothing, because the damage that we don't repair today, the action against climate change we don't take today, will become a disaster tomorrow. It's like having a pipe leaking in your ceiling. If you don't do something today, you have to do it tomorrow. And in the meantime, you suffer a lot of damages.
So let's come to the second group of hypocrisies, what we call the sustainability's false prophets. You know, there are Moses, they don't have the 10 commanders, but they have hundreds of metrics of ESG. Hundreds. And I'm one of the victims. I've been the chairman of an ESG committee for big insurance for 4 years. I know what I'm talking about. And I finally succeeded in eliminating my committee. What happens is that the whole purpose of this, and we explain in the book what's happening really, is to create almost a new accounting, where at the end, when you look at the balance sheet and the P&L of a company, you see one number, which is the profit, sometimes you have the cash flows, and next to it, how good a company is, and you measure the good based on ESG ranking. Now, this thing has created an enormous opportunity for greenwashing, particularly in the finance, because the finance and the banks have put themselves as they would save the planet. They are the bad guys. This time they are the good guys. I've been for years in a committee for the bank, and I've seen enormous amount of greenwashing. 35 billion of sustainable trillion of sustainable investment declared. We estimate 3 billion really. So an enormous amount of greenwashing. But there's something more to this. There is close to this, there is an ambiguity being growing of a new form of capitalism, which actually has happened in what was for hundreds of years the temple of capitalism, which is Harvard. In Harvard, essentially, Rebecca Henderson is the leader of this process. She's a very famous professor. She wrote this book, Reimagining Capitalism, How Business Can Save the World. And this is the story that is happening. This is in academics. And by the way, it's happening in our university. We're talking in many universities about it. What's the ambiguity? Essentially, ambiguity comes from an idea. It says you need to worry about ESG, but if you worry about ESG and you got high ESG metrics, then you also create shareholder value. But then, so shareholder value is important. Is it not important? And by the way, all the correlation between ESG success and shareholder value that they're trying to measure are wrong. My former company, McKinsey, has an article in the quarterly proving the correlation, and another one 2 years later proving that the correlation does not exist. So this is ambiguous. Now, all this stuff has opened the highway for the guys that Luca mentioned before, essentially people who are denials. This guy, I'm sure some of you know who he is, Vivek Ramaswamy. He's an entrepreneur of Indian origin, made a fortune with a biotech startup, decided that he didn't like what he saw and wrote this book, Woke Inch, essentially inside the corporate social justice scam. And it's all centered about politics at the point that he joined the election process to compete against Donald Trump, lost. Donald Trump put him together with Musk in the project to improve the Dodge process. Then he left. However, this is what's happening in the United States. In the United States, woke capitalism is actually creating the rejection of the notion of sustainability, and with it, climate. But in Europe, we are seeing a different story, and we're witnessing today, by the way, we're witnessing every day. In Europe, world capitalism has always been, we have social capitalism. We don't even talk about world capitalism in Europe. So essentially, it's all about bureaucracy. We see this all the day. CSRD, the green asset ratio for a bank. You get crazy to measure it. We spend days to try to measure the green asset ratio, which is an obsessive disclosure. The CSDDD, which is an inquisitive due diligence on the environment and the people protection for companies. And essentially companies have to do this not only for them, but a whole supply chain. CO2 fines to the car industry, we'll talk about it. Essentially punishing OEMs with no incentives to create incentive for cars. The CBA, a very ineffective protection from the rising CO2 cost. Essentially, it's a form of tariffs, if you want, like Donald Trump is doing. So we envisaged that this was going to happen, and it's happening. We wrote this before Donald Trump, 1 month before his election. Throw away the baby with the dirty water. Who is the baby? Like fight against climate. What's the dirty water? World capitalism in the United States, bureaucracy in Europe. This is happening. And that's why we're writing the book, because people do not realize really what is really happening. So climate clock risks being put back by 30 years. Because Luca and I have worked on this for almost 30 years. We see miracle happening. And we can tell personally how we got involved with this. But we see this clock going back very, very seriously. Avanti. Okay. As you know, in the triangle that Luca described, the politics is very important, particularly global politics, because CO2 is global. Unfortunately, what is happening is that the COPs, the Conference of the Parties, is really not enough. The last one in Baku was a total disaster. And you needed 3 players. Without them, there's nothing you can do, because they're going to move all the other hundreds of countries moving along. You see the U-turn of Donald Trump. You see, we'll talk about the green ratio, the Green Deal, which is a terrible Green Deal, terrible, the old and the new one. And the only one who's actually moving is China, believe it or not, who from a situation where essentially was poisoning the atmosphere with CO2 is becoming the real champion. Why? Because for moral reason? No, because they saw an incredible business coming, so they became the leader in solar panels. They are the leader in electric cars, and they're going to dominate the world with that. So, and then what we're seeing, all of a sudden, these guys, the prophets of sustainability, the big banks, BlackRock, who has decided that they're going to invest only in good company, high CSG, move back. It took 3 months to move back, moving essentially their hypocrisy, showing their hypocrisy. And the same thing for all the inclusion and LGBT. Meta canceled all the plan. This is happening today, and you will see more and more of this happening. This is as far as the mitigation. As you know, you look at climate from 2 perspectives: mitigation, which is reducing the amount of CO2, and adaptation. And adaptation becomes crucial. We realize that the 1.5 degrees is realistic. And I don't want to tell you what the scenario for this world is +2, +3, and +4, which is very possible. What is happening? What are the politicians doing? They do not think about prevention. The example is the Trump blasted Biden, no water in the fire hydrants. That's ridiculous. I mean, what you really need to do is prevent. There was a big fire in Israel, in Jerusalem, about a month and a half ago, and I've learned a few things. For instance, they're putting sensors in the trees. They will essentially signal which trees are heating up, either because of people is doing it or the heat, so that the satellite can catch it up. And there are many things that are happening. Whereas the hundreds of startups that are working on this. On the other side, even the environmentalists forgot about adaptation. Why? It's so much easier and nicer to go around the street with a big thing and say no fossil fuel than to worry about adaptation. Also because adaptation, unlike mitigation, is local, is not global. The way you worry about adaptation in Sicily is very different by the way you worry about adaptation in Bologna. So it doesn't fit the COP. Nobody worries about adaptation. So we find that there's something going on, there is a thinking behind this, which is unhealthy. And the thinking is, we call it the stalemate of the zero sum in Europe. It's climate versus